Good Thursday morning, everybody, and welcome into it. This is the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, each and every Thursday here at Volquest.com. Volquest on the YouTube channel. If you haven't already, if you're listening, if you're watching us right now and you haven't joined us over at Volquest.com, not sure what you're waiting on. The best recruiting nuggets in the game, the best team news. You can find it all in the General's Quarters and over at Volquest.com. And, of course, please subscribe to Volquest on YouTube if you haven't already. I got Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, Matt Ray. I am Eric Kane. We got a whole lot of questions to get into, but first, a big thank you to our proud sponsors, Exterior Home Solutions. A free estimate. Go ahead and give them a call today at 865-524-5888. That's a free estimate at 865-524-5888. A lot of questions. We'll go ahead and start with a little offensive line talk from Sizevall. Offensive line seems to be the biggest question mark on offense this year. Where would you rank all 5 starting offensive line spots 1 through 5? 1 being the most worrisome, 5 being the least worrisome. Brent Hubbs, you want to take a crack at this?
Well, at 5, I would go center because I'm not worried about Cooper Mays there. I would go Javante Spraggins at guard with the amount that he's played. He's a 4 or 5. I'm not worried about that one. If you're talking about specifics, I think there is some depth at the guard spot, not necessarily at center. So my concern about center would drop significantly if Cooper Mays got hurt. I think both tackle positions, until somebody is proven there, is a concern. So that's a low number for me at both tackles. I think John Campbell will be okay, but I've got to see him play in this league. And they split time with the other 2 last year, so I don't think they're a 1, but I don't think they're a 5 in terms of your comfort level either. Both those guys in Mincy and J.J. Crawford can get better. The biggest thing is just finding 2 tackles. I think elsewhere they're going to be okay. The other guard spot, which is up in the air, they got enough bodies there that I think they'll find somebody and be comfortable, Rob, whether that's Addison Nichols or Ollie Lane or whoever. I mean, there's enough bodies there to work with. It's just
Carrick, the kid from the Texas transfer.
Andre Carrick. So it's just, to me, it's the low number in terms of worry is the tackle position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add. I mean, it's not a horrible. Crawford and Mincy have both played. Campbell obviously played at Miami, so it's not like the cupboard is completely bare. But you just you got to have some guys step up and at tackle and kind of make it theirs.
All right,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say one side last year you just never had to worry about, and Darnell Wright. I mean, it was just it was never even a thought about, hey, get somebody over there to chip or to help. I mean, that side was handled. It was like, if we need to do something on the left side, we can bring a tight end over, but we don't have to worry about the right side. Until you're proving yourself right now, you may feel like you need a little help on both sides, which is really hard to do from a protection standpoint.
Yep, I would agree with that. Let's go to recruiting. HSV Vol. If they can land Singleton and Spillman, where would you rank the past 2 linebacker classes on paper compared to the past, Matt?
Man, if you land both of those guys in this class and you pair them with an Arion Carter, Jeremiah T-Lander, Jalen Smith, it's back-to-back probably the best 2 classes I can think of in recent memory. I mean, just some guys that can do a lot of things sideline to sideline and really help you. Also, guys that can cover. I mean, if you start talking about Tylen Singleton, if you bring him into this class, he reminds me a lot of, Arion Carter in the way that he can move very fluidly and do certain things in and around the box. I mean, some schools are recruiting to play strong safety, right? So to me, if you're Tennessee, that's what you want to see at the linebacker position. You want to get faster sideline to sideline and really, be able to disrupt havoc. And I think all those guys can do that.
Let's go to CB Vol. Rob Lewis, more likely to happen in 2023. 1 Tennessee running back goes for 200-plus yards in a game, or 2,200 yards rushing by the season from the entire running back corps. I think both of those are very possible because it's easy to have one guy just shoot up and have a day, right?
Well, he's saying they have 2,200 total rushing yards for the season as a team?
Yes.
Oh, that's a lock.
Yeah, because they had almost 26 last year.
I mean, they're going to average 200 plus a game. I mean, they've done that. I mean, did that last year, or they're going to average right around 200 a game. So that's an absolute lock. But I think there's a strong possibility somebody goes for 200 as well. I mean, I mean, you look at the Vanderbilt game last year. I mean, I don't think that was an outlier for what this offense can do when they get a defense on their heels. But I think both those scenarios are pretty likely. But definitely 2,200 total yards as an offense for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Brent, if Jalen Wright could have got maybe 2-3 more carries, he probably would have eclipsed 200 in that Vanderbilt game, right?
Well, I mean, again, all it takes is one long run.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're putting yourself in a total different position. You break off an 80-yard run, and it doesn't take long for those things to add up. But I think if you're looking at the likelihood of things happening, you're looking at the last 2 years and the fact that this team from the get-go has been able to run the football as effectively as they have been. I don't see them getting – I don't see anybody just lining up and stopping them outside of maybe Georgia, who did it a year ago. I just don't think that – I think you're worried so much about sideline to sideline with the passing game that it frees up so many gaps in the inside. And I think, Matt, I think what you're seeing too is you're seeing backs and offensive linemen get a better feel for the run game. And I think that's why you saw, for the most part, the run game be better in year 2 than in year 1, because the backs have a feel for where those gaps are going to be, and the offensive line has a better feel for how to block the run game.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't feel like you're a fish out of water out there anymore, right? You know what to expect. You know where your linemen are going to be. You know where that hole's going to be, and you're confident in it. And I think the biggest thing for any running back, I mean, especially some guys that are younger, is to find that confidence level when you're running behind your offensive line, and know that you may not get smacked in the mouth at the line of scrimmage every single time that you take a handoff. And I think that's been big for Tennessee under Josh Heupel.
Well, I'll see where the poster's going with this, because I actually pulled up the PDF stat sheet, and we won't spend too much more time on this. But Tennessee, as a team, 2,593 rushing yards last season. You take out 430 by Hendon Hooker, take out 77 by Joe Milton. That brings you pretty close to that 2,200 mark, from just the running backs, if you will, in this group. So it could be close, but I would still say Tennessee's running back room could probably eclipse 2,200 in my opinion. Let's go to next up. We'll go Texas Vol. Matt, will this year's class be similar to last year, where 90% were in the boat before the season started? And who is the it guy who other guys can follow, and who other guys want to follow and come play with?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think this weekend coming up goes a long way in determining the answer to that question. You look back to last year, and, wasn't a lot of movement coming out of that weekend, right away. But when you look at the guys that were here, they formed a bulk of that class. That's the hope for Tennessee again this weekend. That's what they want to see happen. And I think with the way the recruiting calendar shifted, a month of June for official visits and July for decision, during that dead month, I think there's a good chance you see Tennessee's class fill out. I think there's a good chance you see a lot of classes across the country fill out during that time. So, yeah, I think, 90%, I don't know that it gets, that far done, because there's some guys that, Tennessee's going to be in on until the very end, and that may not make a decision until later in the fall or in December. I mean, like Marquez Easley, he's a guy that's not going to make a decision until the fall. Ron Wingo's talked about not making a decision until the fall. Mike Matthews, he could be a July decision. He could be a fall decision. So there's some guys that you just don't know where things end up at. What was the second part of that question, Eric?
Who is the it guy in this class? Last year it was Nico. Maybe didn't turn out the way we all thought it would. Is it Jake Merklinger this year, the it guy in the class?
That's tough. I don't know. I don't know right now that there is an it guy in the class. Sitting on the outside of the class. If you were to land a Mike Matthews, a Williams Nwaneri, I think guys want to play with those guys. They're both very likable recruits that are very well respected. So if Tennessee's able to get one of those guys in the summer, then I think you see some of that. But that it factor to me, and I know there's a lot of talk about that going on right now at Georgia with Dylan Raiola, and it's just so hard to really see that come about. I think in today's day and age, especially, guys are doing exactly what they feel like is best for them. It's not about following a certain recruit.
And NIL as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
yeah.
Just can't overstate that impact.
Yeah, no doubt. Not just in football too. Brent, I would like to add, the first cycle when Heupel was here, you didn't have enough time to get it all done before the season, right? So you were very much, you were always recruiting, but you were very much adding to your class during the season. This past season, you were in a good spot to where you could have it almost completely done. But in both of those cycles, Josh Heupel and his staff, they've closed pretty well. Last year, getting Aaron Carter, David Hobbs, the year before that. Justin Williams-Thomas was the late ad. That was a big win. James Pierce was a big ad. Tyree West. I think this staff's done a really nice job of closing each of the last two cycles.
Well, and in the reality is you just never stop recruiting. You could say you want to have it done and at the end of June and all those things, but the fact of the matter is you're going to continue to recruit. Maybe it's a guy who's not going to make an early decision. Maybe it's a guy that you find a little bit later. Aaron Carter is a great example of that. If he makes a summer decision, he's a running back at Memphis right now, is where he's at if he sticks with his summer decision. So I think the thing that this staff and this program has done is they've always continued to evaluate. They haven't said, hey, we got our 25 on August 1 and we're done. They've continued to evaluate, looking for guys. And quite frankly, if you can trade up, you trade up for some guys. And that's the way of the world in recruiting. And I think this staff has done a good job finding guys later in the process who have been good players. And I think they've done a good job of just recruiting to the finish line, which you have to do.
Let's go to Hard Hat Vol. What is the status of some injured players from spring? Will they be full go at the start of camp, or do we have guys who will have to be brought along slowly? Guys like Brew McCoy, Brandon Turnage. He mentions there David Hobbs is one of those guys. Jabari Small will be one of those guys. I would assume for the most part, those guys are going to be ready to go, Brent, by fall camp. They were cautious with a lot of those guys, and of course, a couple of those guys had off-season procedures.
Yeah, Brew McCoy's been out of a brace and is basically full go. Now they're going to be smart. They're not going to beat some of these guys up. Yeah. Hobbs, they want to get as much contact work for him as soon as he gets cleared for all the contact work because, that's a defensive lineman from high school. He's got to learn how to play low and get indoctrinated to the world of Rodney Garner, which he will get as soon as the trainers say go on him. But, I don't think they're going to have a bunch of limited guys. I think they'll be cautious with some guys. But I don't think that they're going to have a bunch of guys who are limited because of lingering injuries. I just think they're going to be smart with some guys in some key positions because you just don't want to get anybody hurt in August if you can avoid it.
But there'll be some maintenance days in fall camp. Yes. We've seen a couple of those.
Good way to phrase it, maintenance day.
We've seen a couple of those the last couple of fall camps with Jerome Carvin and some of these other guys.
It's load management. That's like what AP's doing right now.
Got to hit the links. Can't be on camera too much in the month of May. I got you. GoVols 182 says over under 5.5 on the number of top 100 players in this class. Matt,
that's tough. Especially right now in May. Several more rankings updates between now and then.
So Matt says under. Okay.
The potential is definitely there for the over, right? As of where guys are ranked today, I would take the over right now. But we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. It's just so hard to predict in May.
The thing is, people don't realize how quickly things change. A month ago, Tennessee was basically leading for Jaden Riddell. 2 months ago, they definitely were leading for Jaden Riddell. I had a conversation with him in the complex about it. Now he's committed to Georgia. And he was scheduled, as of 48 hours ago, 72 hours ago, he's scheduled to be in Knoxville this weekend. I answered the question on the message board Wednesday morning when asked about him, did Tennessee survive the Georgia weekend? And my reply was, yeah, he's supposed to be here. And then AP comes in and answers in a total different way. And I'm like, wait a minute, you and I have talked about Jaden Riddell 24 hours ago. What's the deal? Oh, it's changed. It's changed in the last 14 hours. And that's recruiting. That's why predictions, and I'm not trying to take a cop out. That's why it's hard to predict because, it literally can change that fast to the good or it can change that fast to the bad, depending on what school you're a part of and in the recruiting process.
And again, there are a lot of top targets that we talk about all the time that are still uncommitted. Some of the biggest fish Tennessee's after. You bring in a couple of those, that changes a whole lot of things. Good question for Rob and Brent here. Rob, this is for My Hard Vols. How much has the in-state high school talent improved in the last decade, and what has to happen to get it to that next level?
It's not even close. I mean, the last decade, go back 10, 15 years ago. I mean, golly, Hubbard, I mean, there were some, I mean, I'd have to go look in 2000. I mean, there were some years there probably weren't 5 kids, in-state kids in a class. Is that wrong? I mean, to think you could get to 10, you'd be taking, you'd be doing your high school gym teacher a favor, signing, maybe somebody's son. It's night and day. I mean, and it's not just the mid-state. I mean, because that was the easy answer, for several years. Murfreesboro's blowing up, Nashville's blowing up, and that's part of it. But you've seen the talent in East Tennessee, which is pretty much non-existent for years. I mean, now there's 2 or 3 SEC type kids in Knox County and surrounding areas every year. So it's night and day, and I think Rob, it's a big deal for Tennessee.
11 or 12 years ago, when I was playing high school in this area, it was Devin Young who was a D1 talent. The kid from Sullivan South, quarterback. There was always a guy I felt like at West, but that's pretty much it. And then now you've got a couple. I mean, you've got Division I talent all over the place, Brent, here in East Tennessee.
Well, and I mean, no offense to Devin Young, but that was a reach when Tennessee took it out. I mean, that was one of those type deals. He had another offer, and I think Tennessee was like an in-state, local kid. We got to get those things done. I mean, you look at it. I mean, there are two NFL wide receivers right now who played in basically Anderson County. I mean, when you talk about Amari Rogers playing at Catholic, and you got T. Higgins playing at Oak Ridge, and they're both in the National Football League. Harrison Smith's still in the National Football League. I mean, it's gotten better and better and continues to get better. It's never going to be Texas, Matt. It's never going to be Georgia. It's not going to be Florida. But I tell you right now, it's a heck of a lot better than it's ever been. The downside to it is it's a heck of a lot more challenging to Tennessee than it's ever been, because there's a lot of transient people in the state of Tennessee now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're Tennessee and you look at that and the way that you've got to try to recruit, and a lot of this talent's at private schools across the state, and I think that makes it even harder, a lot of times, because like you said, these folks move in from, outside the state. They don't have ties, but that doesn't change the fact that they're a really good player. They're now an in-state recruit, and if you're Tennessee, you're supposed to go land them. And that's every state. Don't get me wrong, but here especially, I just think it makes it so much more challenging to do that. And the talent's got so much better over time and should only continue to get better. But like you said, it's not going to be the state of Georgia. It's not going to be the state of Florida. But it's definitely, catching up to the Alabamas of the world, some other states that have produced really good talent over time that have found themselves with the guys in the National Football League.
And the talent, not so much Nashville really, but I mean, historically, so much of the talent has been, in the western part of the state, Memphis, and I don't know. Me and Brent, you and I have said this a million times over the years. I mean, how many SEC schools can you get to from Memphis quicker than you get to Knoxville? I mean, a bunch, and that's always been, the challenge. But the good news for Tennessee that the talent is not as concentrated there as it was 15 years ago.
We'll move on now to Doolittle Vol. Says, I always thought Tennessee was a Louisville Slugger school, but I've noticed several of the guys swinging DeMarinis. I've been noticing some guys making the switch during the season. Is that something the player is given the choice to swing, or is it school related? To my knowledge, and again, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but to my knowledge, and I checked on it, Tennessee is a Louisville Slugger school. That's what they use for the bats, and they use Wilson, branded gloves. And so that was kind of the response I got when I checked on that. I'm not watching every guy's bat, but it's a Louisville Slugger school is what Tennessee is. We'll go to Rocky Top T. Will we finally get some good safety play this year? If so, I think we have to replace some experience with some better talent. I think you guys know who I'm talking about. Brent, what do you think about the safety position? Do we know enough now to believe that there could be some snap sharing back there where there hasn't been any the last couple of years?
I feel like Bill Murray and driving the car, and there's a groundhog right here in front of me. Because
don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
This question is going to be out there. Has been out there. I'm not making fun of the question, but it's going to linger. I mean, until I'm going to borrow, I guess, AP's answer. Until I see it, I'm going to say that they're going to go with experience. I think that to get more athletic, then they need to go with some younger guys. But Willie Martinez, Tim Banks are going to put the guys out there who they think are the best five, and we'll see what those best five look like. I don't think it's a lock that McCullough's a starter, and that's what he's asking about. I mean, let's be transparent here. I don't think that it's a lock that he starts, even though he's got as much experience as he has. But we'll see. I mean, part of that's going to depend on who the corners are. Wesley Walker's going to start at one safety spot. The other safety spot, is that do they find two corners they like better and they move to Nico Slaughter to safety? Does Jordan Thomas, with his little of experience, beat out an experienced guy at safety? We'll see. I mean, I think part of that just depends on what the puzzle looks like on who your best five are when you get yourself midway through fall camp and start to really sort some things out and settle in.
What does Andre Turrentine look like? What does Christian Charles look like back at safety? I mean, Christian Charles got 15 practices at safety over the spring. What's he look like in fall camp? I think those are some things to follow during fall camp. Big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage of the Volquest Mailbag possible. We'll answer some more of your questions here on the other side. But first, a word from Exterior Home Solutions.
Life happens, and damage to your home can be extremely stressful. That's why it's important to find someone who offers efficient, quality work with financing options. Exterior Home Solutions, they value not only family, but community. And they're who I call when life happens, and you should too.
Got a couple here from Athrun. We'll go ahead and start with Matt, a couple of recruiting. What is the standing with offensive tackle Marquez Easley?
Important visits coming up. I mean, that's, in my opinion, he wants to make a decision in October. Has had a date set for a while. I can't remember if it's around a senior night or a birthday, or so. It's something to do in October, around the 16th or 18th. But these official visits are really going to kind of tell the story for him, in my opinion. Tennessee has done a good job there with him to this point. He's a guy that, I think can do a lot of things that they want at the offensive tackle position in this offense. But as he gets out and sees more campuses, we'll see where things go. It feels like Alabama and Georgia are the primary competitors there right now. But Marquez Easley was impressed with Tennessee when he was down here in April. He's continued to relate well with Glenn Ellerby. And I think the Vols have a real shot in this recruitment right now.
Daniel Hill, is he going to make it in this weekend?
He's supposed to. We'll see. I checked with him Saturday or Sunday, and he was supposed to be here. There's going to be a week between that, though. So he was supposed to be here in January, and he was supposed to be here in March. But this one seems a little bit more firm, and he seems a little bit more firm in his stance. So he tentatively, yes.
Chances with wide receiver Wesco, legit or no?
Yeah, got to get him to campus. That June official visit's going to be important. How much staying power does that give you? And then what's his decision timeline like based, after that, do you need to get him back to campus in the fall, let him see a game day atmosphere? I think that's something that would certainly help. But, I think he hasn't been here before to my knowledge. So that June official visit is going to be that June 23rd weekend is a huge weekend for Tennessee on the recruiting calendar, and getting him here and making a good impression is going to be really important as well. And then let's just see how soon he decides. Guys have made a quick decision with really only one visit. So it's possible. He's definitely intrigued, with talking to the people I've talked to in the Midwest. They think he wants to go somewhere and catch passes. And he likes Tennessee, but we'll see what comes of it.
And then last one, thoughts on who could potentially come off the board coming out of this weekend. I think, Matt, it's still, obviously you'll get some guys who are really feeling the weekend, and you'll take them if they want to jump in, but this is more planting the seed for June, right?
Yeah, I think this is more about, building towards June official visits, reestablish them with a lot of guys, and, really trying to close out for what will likely be a lot of of July decisions. And and this weekend's going to be important again about getting a feel where some guys are. A Tylen Singleton, he's going to be here in June. He hasn't officially put out what date that's going to be yet. But then what's his decision timeline look like based off of that? Because if you're Tennessee, right now you're balancing the number of linebackers you want to take. Jordan Burns wants to make a decision in July. Edwin Spillman's kicked around July. I think Tennessee's at a great spot for both of those guys. So you've got to get some answers to some things this weekend. But, yeah, I'm like you, Eric. I think it's more about building toward June right now.
Well, remember this, too. I mean, most guys have a decision date in mind that they want to make their announcement. There's not a ton of, Rob, the old Sunday night, let's call the 8 visitors and see who jumps in the boat type deal. I mean, these guys are committing on their birthday or their mom's birthday.
Mom's birthday.
They've got a date planned in mind to make their announcement and kind of do their deal. You don't get a ton of just kind of off the cuff, kind of spur things. You get some. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't get any, but a lot of these guys have a decision date in mind and emotionally don't generally jump in when they've got that date entrenched in their mind on when they're going to do something.
Yeah, and I was going to say, especially this time of year. I mean, I think the kind of stuff you're talking about is more like an official visit when you get the full court press thrown on you. Maybe you're here for a home football weekend and just, we're blown away or really, really liked your recruiting hostess maybe.
But yeah, you want to get your commitment graphic, your video if you're doing one.
Yes,
those are all things that you want to get laid out.
And it's hard for a coach in May, at the end of May, as Rob was talking about, to come in and say, "Hey, we're only taking 2. One's in the boat. You got to go now, or we're moving on." If it's a quality player, I mean that. You're not seeing a lot of coaches putting the screws on people Memorial Day weekend like you would in January, as Rob was talking about back in the old days, or even now, late fall. Hey, we got to have an answer now, or we've got to move on. That coaches can't sell that very well in the month of May.
And then sometimes you talk to these kids like last year at the Memorial Day event, and sometimes just coming off a weekend thing, and they're just gushing over Tennessee, and they're all but saying that they're coming here, but they won't tell you.
Who was the kid last year, however, that I told me that and ended up? It was Tennessee. The kid was from Alabama.
Edge player, Leo.
Yeah, it was like Tennessee, Penn State. I mean,
he liked the cold, Rob. He liked the weather.
I mean, like Memorial. I can't remember which kid it was, but after Memorial Day, it was a lock. I mean, he was. And now I don't even think Tennessee was the leader at the end of June.
No, it was committed to Penn State.
I mean, you look back to that weekend last year. I mean, I think when we all left there that day, we knew John Slaughter was coming to Tennessee.
Yes. Yeah, you and I talked about that. We were like, that kid's coming 100%.
He didn't want to tell anybody. I fly to Vegas a week later, and he's telling everybody that'll listen that, he's coming to Tennessee, and he's announcing it on this date. I'm like, man, I just saw you 5 days ago. Like, it's a process for these kids, and a lot of it nowadays about social media buzz and creating following and everything. And it's valuable to you, right? I mean, you're creating NIL dollars based off of that.
I was gonna say now more than ever, Rob, with creating value for yourself, a social media following for possibilities in name, image, and likeness.
If you've got 20,000 Instagram followers, you're a lot more marketable than the kid would. That just has his mom and dad and kids from his high school as followers.
GBO Farms. Can Tennessee win 10 games if Joe Milton can't hit the deep ball consistently? Can this offense be designed to excel throwing only short and intermediate, Rob?
I mean, with what we've seen from Heupel in 2 years, I got to think that he could win with, multiple quarterback styles. But I don't know that I see Joe turning into a short and intermediate robot. I mean, do you guys? I mean, I think even if he improves dramatically, which I think Joe will be much better this year, I still just think with that cannon, that arm cannon, I mean, there's just going to be some times where he uncorks one and you're like, man, where was he throwing that thing? I mean, I don't care how much better he gets. I just think when you're working with what he's working with, I think every once in a while it's going to get away from you.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, I mean, he hit a deep ball against Vanderbilt to Jalen Hyatt before it got really nasty and rained. And look, they throttled that thing back. They let him keep throwing deep balls, but they took the intermediate stuff away from him because they didn't want to take a chance on Vanderbilt getting a cheap one. He gets Keaton for a deep ball in the bowl game. He had a couple of deeper throws in the back of the end zone for touchdowns. I think to answer my version of the question and looking at it is, I think for Josh Heupel's offense to be a, quote, record-setting offense and to be what it's designed to be and what everybody perceives it as being, they've got to have a vertical passing game. Now, does that mean it's all 9 routes and straight bombs, or is that seam stuff down the middle, deep square ends? It's a lot of things like that, but they've got to press the ball beyond 15 yards on a consistent basis if this offense is going to run at any kind of octane level that Tennessee fans have enjoyed watching the last 2 years. And I think Joe can handle that. I mean, I do. I think Joe's improved, and I don't worry as much about that as the narrative was about him 2 years ago.
The most impressive throw that Joe Milton's made to me since he's been at Tennessee is the dart in the bowl game to Brew McCoy. If you can make that throw consistently, like you said, Brent, 15, 18, 20 yards down the field, you can stretch defenses thin. If you can throw across the middle of the field, the vertical passing game is going to open up even more because those safeties have to honor it. You put corners on more of an island, and Tennessee's got speed at the receiver position. And to me, I just think if you're Joe Milton, I agree with Rob. There's just going to be times where he uncorks one, the adrenaline's pumping, it's Squirrel White. I'm not overthrowing Squirrel White, and it's just going to get away from him. But, I mean, I do think Joe Milton's capable of doing what Tennessee wants him to do, moving forward.
All right, we'll get a couple more here. LF Vol says, from your recent comments, we seem to be in a good spot, AP and Matt. Seem to be in a good spot with O'Connell, Satterwhite, and Anderson in the interior. Will they take all three and anticipate some transfers out of 2023?
Yeah, they would take all three of those guys right now. I don't know about the transfer piece of the puzzle, but I know if you're Tennessee, I think you don't plan on, Javonte Spraggins and Cooper Mays coming back and using their extra year next season. So you attack it like you want, and Tennessee's going to take a number of guys on the offensive line, and those three guys, on the interior are guys that they really covet.
Well, you look, they're going to lose up to 7 guys on the offensive line, and those aren't transfers.
No.
When you think about it, you look at where Campbell's at, you look at where Mincy, you look at Crawford, you look at Cooper Mays, you look at Javonte Spraggin, you look at Ollie Lane, you look at Jackson Lampley. That's 7 right there. You got to go heavy in this class to continue to build your depth and hope some guys don't transfer out, because you don't want to be that thin in numbers. They're losing a lot on the offensive line. That's why that recruiting class on the offensive line may go as far as 6 or 7 guys out there. So, yeah, all those 3 of those guys want to come, they'll absolutely take them today if they want to jump in the boat.
Rob, we're talking about taking 6 or 7 offensive linemen. What year was it that Derek Dooley didn't take one?
Was it 2012?
Was it 12?
I remember it happening. And then
what was the analysis on that, guys?
I can't remember, but
how dumb was that?
And I don't mean to say anything bad about this kid or young man now, because I always enjoyed him. But to even add to the punchline, Hubbard, like, he doesn't sign an offensive lineman in one class, and then I guess the next year whenever they sign Cody Pope, he signs an offensive lineman. It's a vegetarian
who was 35 pounds underweight to begin with. Maybe
the only vegetarian to ever play offensive line in the SEC. Cody, but who was always a pleasure to do it. Cody, if you hear this, not a knock on you, just Derek Dooley classics.
Oh, all right. Let's go to Sam Smith 2233. Kate, in your expert opinion, assuming we don't host, where do you expect Tennessee to be sent? Regionals projections, they're all over the place. Anybody that follows college baseball knows that. Tennessee will be one of the higher 2 seeds. I don't anticipate Tennessee hosting after being one and done in Hoover. Tennessee will be one of the higher 2 seeds, so that means it will be sent to one of the lower ranked hosts. Coral Gables was, Miami was the one that was projected for Tennessee entering last week, but 2 weeks before that it was Morgantown. 3 weeks before that it was Clemson. Coastal Carolina is one that's kind of trendy, but a lot of times these projections, they'll kind of get right in terms of the host teams, but from there it's just I mean, it's your guess is as good as mine. You just don't necessarily know. So I could see Tennessee, maybe Coastal, Miami, hopefully it's somewhere where you can drive, but I think it will be one of the lower hosting, teams out there, because Tennessee will be regarded as one of the higher 2 seeds and will be dangerous. And we will finish up with Nashville 615. What is the best and worst scheduling scenario for Tennessee to come out of Destin in the spring meetings, Brent?
Well, I don't know that they're going to get anything resolved in the spring meetings. This thing's taken on a bit of a life of its own. When you talk about 8 games versus 9 games, I think we've all assumed 9. Sounds like that there's some people in the SEC says, hey, if we're going to go 9, let's get more TV money because, that TV deal was agreed upon at 8 games. We'll see. Do they really want to go back to the table and negotiate with TV right now? They're in a good spot, unlike the Big Ten, who's had their issues with TV. What a mess that is. And the Pac-12 can't. I mean, I don't know. That thing may be on all access cable.
I think Mark Packer's got a shot.
Yeah, I mean,
that package.
Pac-Man Productions might have that package when it's all said and done. So I don't know how aggressive you're going to be there. Not going to be. We'll see. To answer the first part of the question about what's the best case scenario, I don't think there's a bad case scenario because it's not going to be, from a difficulty standpoint, it's not going to be as bad as what Tennessee has faced the last 10, 12 years. When you're talking about, they're the only school in the league playing Georgia, Alabama, Florida every year. And so there's no scenario out there that I've seen that encapsulate Tennessee staying with that murderer's row of scheduling. So I think if you go 6-3, 8-1, whatever you end up being on that, I don't think it's going to be any worse than what Tennessee's played the last 10 years.
We have one more baseball one that I wanted to get in here. I know we're at the end, but the Tennessee baseball team, did it just not want to be in Hoover this week with the regional on the line? They had maybe their worst approach at the plate that we've seen all year long. Brent, you and I were talking about this after the game on Tuesday. Tennessee struggles with anyone that can locate their fastball early and account from the left side and then has any type of breaking movement, a slider, a curveball. And you saw it at Georgia with that freshman that was just throwing junk, but he was super effective against Tennessee. And then with this kid from A&M that Tennessee just torched back in March, and literally was having a bad year, 6 ERA. He was elite against Tennessee on Tuesday. I can say, they weren't going through the motions. They wanted to be there. Tony Vitello certainly took exception to that, to some heckling fans. They wanted to be there. They had a horrible day at the office, and I thought the pitching was good enough if you had any type of approach at the plate to kind of, help you win that game, but unfortunately you didn't. So Tennessee wanted to be there. Tennessee wasn't going through the motions. They just, unfortunately, Brent had a rough day away from Lindsey Nelson Stadium, and there's been a couple of those this year, more than a couple.
Yeah, it's been commonplace when you look at the number of runs. 79 runs in 19 road games this year, and that includes 3 games where they were in double figures. I think the more eye-opening stat or more accurate stat is 11 of the 19 road games they've scored 3 runs or less on the road. They've just not consistently, plated runs. And, when you're playing, Rob, that old school 10-9 football game in baseball, when you're asking your pitchers basically don't give up anything, which is what teams did for a while in the SEC defensively, is, hey, don't give up anything and we'll scratch out, 3 field goals or a touchdown and a field goal. That's hard to do on a consistent basis. You got to be able to score. You got to be able to put some runs on the board and away from Lindsey Nelson Stadium. That's just not been Tennessee's forte this year.
And it's just really, I don't have an answer for it. My only observation is it's really weird because, I know some road environments can be oppressive, but it's not, it's the hostility from going on the road as far as the crowd, to me anyway, is nothing compared to, coming into Neyland as a road team or coming or going into Rupp Arena or, just being on the road and the atmosphere, to me, would seem like baseball would be the sport that's least affected by that. And again, that's my opinion from the outside looking in. So that my point being, I think that makes it even stranger.
Athletes are all about routine, all about schedules, and all athletes, but especially baseball players. And this team just doesn't like playing and doesn't like their routine altered on the road. It feels like, And so it's just kind of been one of those things. Plus, it can't play in weather. It's proven that a couple times this year, last year, and it was raining, and those jerseys were super heavy on Tuesday. They should have postponed that game well earlier. They let it go as long as they could. So we'll see. Important thing is Tennessee's going to be in the postseason. Tennessee will be one of the highest rated 2 seeds they'll play, and they still have the ingredients to make it out of a regional. That's how this team is built. You've just gotta score some runs, and Tennessee certainly didn't score any runs in Hoover. We'll have Tennessee baseball coverage, as always, over Volquest.com. A huge recruiting weekend. That is coming up this weekend. AP Matt will be headlining that one, and we'll have tons of coverage of Tennessee's Memorial Day. Matt, what are they calling it? What's the official title? Do we know? Not what we're calling it. What are they calling it?
865 Live, I believe.
Okay.
It's got a little bit better ring to it than Rocky Top Palooza.
Was that a Butch? Was that what were some of Butch's good ones?
Orange Carpet Day.
Orange Carpet Day was a big one. Did he win the home run derby that year? Butch?
I don't know. I mean, they've done everything. They've played paintball. They've had home run derbies.
Trash can.
Putt.
They've played putt. They have
scavenger hunt last year.
They've done all kinds of things. So and you have to be creative. I know we kind of joke about that stuff, but I mean, a lot of these guys have seen here. I mean, you're trying to create a family deal, and you're trying to make it fun and entertaining, and not just, hey, let's all get on a golf cart and let's go see the torchbearer, and let's go up to the top of the hill and see Ayers Hall, and let's do a tour of the stadium, and then we'll go to the library, and then we'll come back. And you know what I mean? It's got to have more splash to it than that, Matt, to get people's attention.
I think in any fan base and any program across the country, you look at things differently than a recruit does, right? I think if you're a fan of Tennessee, you say, the stadium's sold out on Sunday, the campus is beautiful. That's not what these kids are looking for when they come here. Those are great perks and great added benefits, but they're looking for what you said, Brent. They're looking for family. They're looking for fun, and what's it going to be like for the 3 to 4 years that they're going to be here inside of that complex.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's you got to show that during these big weekends.
I think that's by far the most important, because I mean, let's face it, if you're looking at Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, everybody's got great facilities. Everybody has a great stadium. Everybody's got a great indoor complex. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's relationships with some NIL sprinkled in. I mean, it's not all sunshine and lollipops.
865 Live. I love it. That's coming up this weekend. We'll be covering that. Tons and tons and tons of recruiting coverage over at Volquest.com on the Journal's Quarters. And go ahead and join us over there. If you haven't already, join the family, Volquest.com. Best news for Tennessee out there. Subscribe and follow us on YouTube as well by searching Volquest on the YouTube channel. A big thank you to our friends Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage possible. If you have a need for upgrading your home, putting some repairs on there, your siding, your roof, your whatever it can be, give them a call for a free consultation. That is Exterior Home Solutions at 865-524-5888. For Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, Matt Ray, I am Eric Kane. Appreciate all the questions today, and thanks so much for listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast.